On October 25, 2017, Ruja Ignatova, the charismatic founder of OneCoin, vanishes after boarding a Ryanair flight from Sofia to Athens, never to be seen again. At the time, international investigators were closing in, and her disappearance triggers a mystery that spans continents, criminal masterminds, and an underground world of money laundering, assassinations, and billion-dollar fraud. Born on May 30, 1980 in Rus, Bulgaria, Ruja Ignatova rose to become one of the world's most wanted fugitives. Known as the Crypto Queen, she founded OneCoin in 2014, promoting it as a revolutionary cryptocurrency that would rival Bitcoin. Instead, it was an elaborate $4 billion Ponzi scheme that showed the darkest side of crypto hype. Ignatova immigrated to Germany in 1990 and earned stellar academic credentials, a PhD in private international law from the University of Constance in 2005, followed by a master's from Oxford. Early in her career, she worked for McKinsey in Sofia and co-acquired a German foundry in 2010, which collapsed under dubious conditions, leading to her receiving a 14-month suspended sentence for fraud in 2012. In 2013, she experimented with Bitcoin, an MLM-style crypto pitch that foreshadowed OneCoin. Despite regulatory warnings emerging in 2016 across Europe, OneCoin's internal marketing soared. Investors bought pricey education packages, and Ruja hosted lavish conferences worldwide. The scheme's complexity deepened when, in early 2017, OneCoin suspended its exchange platform without warning, an ominous sign of imminent collapse. By mid-2017, formal investigations, including in India and Italy, were underway, and a U.S. grand jury had sealed indictments. From 2014 to 2017, OneCoin took in over $4 billion from investors in China, Brazil, Pakistan, Norway, Uganda, and more. Characteristics: centralized ledger, no blockchain, pay-to-play MLM model, and a false promise of exponential coin value. Key partner, Carl Sebastian Greenwood, pocketed roughly $300 million and was sentenced in the U.S. to 20 years in September 2023. In March 2019, Ruja's brother, Konstantin Ignatov, pleaded guilty to similar fraud and money laundering charges in Manhattan. The climax came in October 2017, when indictments in the U.S., India, and Germany prompted Ruja to disappear. She skipped a scheduled speech in Lisbon, boarded a Ryanair flight to Athens, and melted away. This vanishing act ended her public empire and signaled the collapse of OneCoin's infrastructure and facade. Investigations became global. In May 2022, Europol listed her as Europe's most wanted, and by June 30, 2022, the FBI placed her on its 10 most wanted list, initially offering a $100,000 reward, later increased to $5 million in June 2024. In March 2023, U.S. prosecutors began confiscating her assets, and UK courts froze her properties worldwide. Rumors swirl as Bulgarian police informants allege she was murdered in November 2018 on orders from mob kingpin Taki Christoforos Amanatidis, aboard a yacht in the Ionian Sea, body dismembered and disposed of at sea. But the FBI still operates under the assumption she might be alive. OneCoin devastated millions, globally quantified victims number in the millions, with at least $4 billion lost. Rural investors in Uganda lost homes, and China alone recovered $268 million across 98 prosecutions. The event illustrates vulnerabilities in crypto regulation, money laundering gaps, especially in Dubai and the UAE, where OneCoin funds flowed into luxury real estate. Her disappearance and possible mafia assassination deepen mistrust in both digital finance and global law enforcement. Today, Ruja Ignatova remains a potent symbol of crime's modern sophistication, educated, charismatic, global, and yet a fugitive and cipher. The unraveling of her empire sparked reforms and warning flags about unregulated digital currencies, Ponzi contagion, and the human cost behind the headlines. To date, she remains the most wanted woman in the world. On January 9, 2015, in broad daylight, Amity Coulibaly bursts into the hyperkosher kosher supermarket in the Porte de Vincennes district of Paris at around 1300 hours Central European Time and opens fire, killing 4 Jewish hostages and injuring others during his chilling siege that lasts until 1730. Central European Time, when police storm the premises and neutralize him. His companion and central enigma, Hayat Boumediene, was conspicuously absent. Already labeled armed and dangerous, she had vanished. Authorities declared her France's most wanted woman. Simultaneously, terror sweeps across Paris. 2 days earlier, the Charlie Hebdo attacks carried out by the Kouachi brothers shook the nation. Amidst this fear, one question lingers. Where is Boumediene, and what is her role? Hayat Boumediene was born on June 26, 1988, in France, grew up in a fractured childhood. The daughter of Algerian immigrants, she lost her mother at age 6 and was shuffled between foster homes, many ending in reports of abuse, while her father drifted away. Within a large family of 6 siblings, she adopted a new surname to sound more French and later embraced a conservative religious identity, eventually wearing niqab. In 2007, Boumediene took a job as a cashier. By 2009, she met Amity Coulibaly in Juvisy-sur-Orge, and they married in a non-civil Islamic ceremony on July 5, 2009. Together, they lived in Bagneux and later Fontenay-aux-Roses. They appeared outwardly ordinary, trips to Crete, Malaysia, and the Dominican Republic, and Coulibaly even briefly worked at Coca-Cola in Grigny before turning religious. But from 2010, their radical path emerged. Police intercepted stockpiles of ammunition in their home and noted their attendance at crossbow training sessions with convicted jihadist Jamal Baghal. In 2014, the couple performed the Hajj, and Boumediene began wearing full face coverings, losing her job as she insisted on covering at work. She also reportedly engaged in vehicle fraud to finance extremist activities. By late 2014, police surveillance intensified. On December 30, 2014, the couple were detained by police in Paris while in a rented Seat Ibiza, but allowed to go after their documents were checked. On December 31st, Coulibaly drove Boumediene to Madrid, where they stayed until January 2, 2015. At that point, she flew to Istanbul with a suspected extremist associate, Mahdi Sabri Belhussein, then traveled to Şanlıurfa near the Syrian border on January 4th. Monitored by Turkish authorities due to suspicious behavior, she made frequent phone calls, including over 500 contacts with the wife of Sharif Kouachi in 2014, suggesting deep ties to the same terror cell. On January 8, 2015, Coulibaly killed municipal police officer Clarissa Jean-Philippe in Montrouge. Boumediene is believed to have crossed into ISIS-held Syria that same day. She was last tracked by phone on January 10th in Tel Abyad, Syria. Amity Coulibaly's major acts in early January included the assassination of a policewoman in Montrouge on January 8th and the hostage-taking and mass murder at the hyperkosher supermarket on January 9th, ending with police intervention. Over the prior year, investigators discovered Boumediene's fingerprints and DNA on weapons stored in a safe house in Gentilly, and found evidence that she helped transfer funds and logistics. The volume of recorded communication with the Kouachi network further implicated her deeply. January 9th to 10th, 2015 marked the peak. As Coulibaly perpetrated one of France's most shocking terror attacks, Boumediene boarded a path of no return, fleeing across borders while the world recoiled. On the evening of the siege, police confirmed Coulibaly's death. A week later, ISIS's Dar al-Islam magazine, later Dabiq, published what it claimed was her first interview. She was portrayed in the heart of the caliphate, praising life under ISIS and urging women to join. In that interview, she is cited as saying, "May France be cursed by Allah," and lauding her husband's actions. France launched one of its most extensive manhunts. French and international warrants were issued. Boumediene was labeled armed and extremely dangerous. Turkish intelligence assisted in tracing her path through Istanbul and then into Syria. By December 16, 2020, she was convicted in absentia, along with 13 others, receiving a 30-year sentence for membership of a terrorist enterprise and financing terrorism. Despite unverified reports of her death in a 2019 airstrike at Baghouz, survivors later claimed to have seen her in 2019 in Al-Hol, or Al-Hol camp, east of the Euphrates. A 2020 testimony to a French judge supports that she re-entered civilian anonymity under a false identity. Despite an international arrest warrant, no reward has been publicly offered. Intelligence relies on surveillance and testimonies from jihadist acquaintances. The Boumediene case sent shockwaves through France and Europe. A young woman, radicalized and radicalizing, playing a role behind one of the continent's darkest terror waves. Today, over 10 years after the 2015 attacks, Hayat Boumediene remains at large. Her life traces a path from a traumatized foster child to a radicalized actor in mass murder, from comfortable suburbs to war zones, and perhaps now, anonymity under false identities. Her story continues to challenge France's justice systems, intelligence agencies, and judicial efforts to hold accomplices accountable, even decades later. If you enjoy these stories, please like the video and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello to you in the comments. On December 5, 1983, Samantha Louise Lewthwaite was born in Banbridge, Northern Ireland. Daughter of a British Army veteran, she grew up first in Northern Ireland, then Aylesbury, England. Despite her inconspicuous early life, by her early 40s, she had become one of the Western world's most wanted terror suspects, known globally as the White Widow. The story began with shocking revelations in early 2012. Kenyan authorities issued an arrest warrant for Samantha on 4th January, accusing her of possessing explosives and plotting terror attacks in Kenya. Soon after, Interpol issued a global red notice in March 2012, under charges including conspiracy and possession of bomb-making materials. British and Kenyan intelligence services joined forces, launching a high-stakes hunt for the fugitive, her 3 children at her side. Raised as a Christian, Samantha's life pivoted in 1994 when her parents separated. By age 17, she converted to Islam and adopted the name Sharafia. In 2002, she met Jamaican-born Jermaine Lindsay via an online Islamic forum. They married on the 30th of October 2002 in Aylesbury. In 2005, a heavily pregnant Samantha was left widowed when Lindsay detonated a suicide bomb on a London Underground train between King's Cross and Russell Square on 7th July, killing 26 passengers. Authorities initially classified her as a grieving widow, but fingerprints later tied her to radical networks, hinting at deeper involvement. In 2008 to 2009, Samantha resurfaced in South Africa under the identity Natalie Faye Webb, living in Johannesburg and working in IT while pregnant with her 4th child. In late 2011, she reappeared in Mombasa, Kenya, using a forged South African passport under the same alias, accompanied by her 3 children. Kenyan police raided the apartment of her associate Jermaine Grant in December 2011. Grant confessed that Samantha was the financier of the cell and that an attack was imminent. On 24 June 2012, during a Euro 2012 match, a grenade was thrown into the packed Jericho bar in Mombasa, killing 3 spectators and wounding 25 more. Kenyan police alleged that Samantha Lewthwaite was spotted nearby prior to the attack and identified her as a key perpetrator. Earlier, in January 2012, her arrest warrant cited a foiled Christmas 2011 bomb plot targeting a Mombasa hotel or Nairobi Mall. She was also conjectured to have ties to the devastating Westgate shopping mall attack in Nairobi on 21 to 24 September 2013, though Al-Shabaab denied her involvement, and Kenyan officials later clarified she was not on site. Evidence from the Mombasa raid was damning. Fingerprints confirmed as hers, a cache of detonators, ammunition, an AK-47 magazine, and a ruined laptop containing an explosives handbook and an ode to Osama bin Laden, allegedly penned by Samantha. This pivotal moment shifted her status from suspect to internationally wanted extremist. Following the laptop's contents, found late 2013, Interpol officially issued a red notice on 26 September 2013, seeking her arrest on charges of explosives possession and conspiracy to commit felony. Joint efforts by Kenyan authorities, Scotland Yard, CIA, and Interpol ensued, prompting cross-border manhunts. Reports from 2014 to 2015 placed her within al-Shabaab's ranks near the Somalia-Kenya border, potentially married to senior commander Hassan Malim Ibrahim in 2014. Her uncle later speculated she might be dead, while analysts surmised she was likely sheltered in remote areas of Somalia or Tanzania. No public financial bounty has been confirmed, but Interpol's red notice remains active. She is a wanted woman. Samantha's alleged actions through bomb plots, grenade attacks, and terror network coordination have been tied to over 400 deaths in East Africa by 2015. Her metamorphosis, from shy Northern Irish British schoolgirl to ideologue, raises haunting questions about radicalization pathways, the role of ideology, trauma, and identity. While some portray her as a mastermind, filmmakers suggest she may have been exploited by mail handlers. As of mid-2025, her fate remains uncertain. Whether alive or deceased, her legacy symbolizes the transnational and gender-transcending nature of modern terror. The White Widow epitomizes how personal anguish, extremist ideology, and opportunistic mentorship can converge into a formidable threat, and leaves us to ponder how many more quiet conversions are unfolding today. On a cold night in May 1973, gunfire erupted on the New Jersey Turnpike. In the aftermath, a New Jersey state trooper was dead, another was wounded, and a black woman lay bleeding beside her slain comrade. That woman was Joanne Chesimard, better known today as Assata Shakur. Her name would soon be etched into FBI wanted posters, courtroom transcripts, and revolutionary graffiti alike. But was she a cop killer or a political scapegoat? To some, she's a terrorist. To others, a hero in exile. But the true story of Assata Shakur is tangled in racial politics, shootouts, prison breaks, and international diplomacy. And it all started long before that night on the Turnpike. Assata Shakur is the first woman ever to be placed on the FBI's most wanted terrorists list. Accused of participating in multiple violent crimes throughout the 1970s, including bank robberies and the murder of a police officer, Shakur became a central figure in the Black Liberation Army, BLA, a radical militant offshoot of the Black Panther Party. But her case is far more than a simple matter of guilt or innocence. It's a lightning rod for the fraught intersection of race, justice, and power in America. To this day, Shakur remains a fugitive, living in exile in Cuba under political asylum granted by Fidel Castro's government. The U.S. has placed a $2 million bounty on her head. So, how did a college-educated young woman from New York become one of America's most infamous fugitives? Born as Joanne Deborah Byron on July 16, 1947, in Jamaica, Queens, New York City, Assata Shakur came of age during the peak of the civil rights movement. Raised primarily by her grandparents in Wilmington, North Carolina, she later returned to New York, where she attended the borough of Manhattan Community College and later the City College of New York. Like many young Black Americans in the late 1960s, Joanne became politicized by the assassinations of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., as well as the pervasive racism and police brutality plaguing urban communities. She eventually dropped out of college and joined the Black Panther Party, where she worked on community outreach programs in Harlem. Disillusioned by the internal conflicts and FBI infiltration within the Panthers, she moved toward the more militant Black Liberation Army, a group that advocated armed resistance against the U.S. government. By the early 1970s, she had changed her name to Assata Olugbala Shakur, Assata meaning she who struggles, and Shakur, a common surname among Black Muslims and revolutionaries. She was no longer a student activist. She was a wanted revolutionary. Between 1971 and 1973, law enforcement agencies across the U.S. suspected Shakur of being involved in a string of crimes linked to the BLA, including armed robberies, attempted murders, and ambushes on police officers. She was allegedly involved in a 1971 robbery at the Statler Hilton Hotel in New York and multiple bank heists. The FBI, in coordination with local law enforcement, launched COINTELPRO, a counterintelligence program that targeted radical political organizations, placing Shakur under constant surveillance. She was arrested multiple times, but was either released or acquitted due to a lack of evidence. However, she became increasingly wary of the judicial system, which she believed was designed to suppress black dissent. The tension reached a boiling point on May 2, 1973, when a Pontiac Le Mans carrying Shakur and two other BLA members, Zaid Malik Shakur and Sundiata Akoli, was stopped by state troopers James Harper and Werner Forster on the New Jersey Turnpike near East Brunswick. According to the official police report, the troopers pulled the car over due to a broken taillight and suspect license plates. What followed was a chaotic, deadly shootout. Zaid Malik Shakur and trooper Werner Forster were killed. Asada was shot in the arm and shoulder. Sundiata Akoli fled the scene, but was captured the next day. Shakur was arrested at the scene and charged with the murder of trooper Forster, as well as attempted murder, armed robbery, and several other crimes stemming from earlier BLA-related incidents. At trial, prosecutors argued that Shakur had opened fire on the troopers with a concealed handgun and that her intent was premeditated. The defense argued that the officers opened fire first, that Shakur had been unarmed, and that she was shot while her hands were raised in surrender. Ballistic evidence became a point of contention. Shakur's fingerprints were not found on any weapon, and no gunpowder residue was found on her hands. Nevertheless, on March 25, 1977, a New Jersey jury found her guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced her to life in prison. The most shocking chapter of Asada's story came on November 2, 1979. While serving her life sentence at the Clinton Correctional Facility for Women in New Jersey, Shakur escaped. Armed members of the BLA staged a prison break, taking 2 prison guards hostage and fleeing with Shakur in a prison van. She vanished from public view, launching one of the largest fugitive manhunts in U.S. history. For years, she remained underground, protected by sympathizers of the Black Liberation Movement. Then, in 1984, it was confirmed that she had resurfaced in Cuba. The Cuban government had granted her political asylum, declaring her a victim of racial and political persecution. In the decades that followed her escape, the FBI and U.S. Marshal Service never closed the case. Asada Shakur was placed on the FBI's Most Wanted Terrorists list in 2013, with a $2 million reward for information leading to her capture. Despite multiple diplomatic attempts, Cuba has consistently refused to extradite her. The U.S. government continues to label her a domestic terrorist, citing her alleged role in violent armed conflicts and the murder of a police officer. Over the years, the debate over Shakur's guilt has become a cultural and political flashpoint. She has written an autobiography from exile, and her case is frequently cited by activists, scholars, and politicians on both sides of the political divide. Some see her as a political prisoner who symbolizes systemic oppression. Others regard her as a violent criminal who has evaded justice. The investigation remains technically open, but her location in Cuba, protected by international law and the political friction between the two countries, has made any capture or return highly unlikely. Asada Shakur's story is no longer just a matter of criminal law. It's a global symbol of racial justice, government overreach, and unresolved history. For some, she remains an unrepentant cop killer. For others, she's a symbol of resistance against a system that disproportionately targets Black activists. In many ways, the legend of Asada has outgrown the woman herself. Her name is invoked in protest chants, her words quoted in activist circles, and her image plastered across murals from Havana to Harlem. The U.S. continues to brand her a terrorist, Cuba continues to shelter her, and in the middle of it all is a woman whose story refuses to fade. A woman caught between bullets and ideology, between courtrooms and revolution. Whether Asada Shakur is remembered as a martyr or a murderer may depend on who tells the story. But one thing is certain. She is one of the most controversial and elusive figures in modern American history. And her story is far from over. On March 13, 1950, a newborn arrives in Porto Alegre, southern Brazil. On this day, Heloísa Borba Gonçalves takes her first breath, unaware that decades later she would become notorious as the Black Widow. But before infamy, she was a young woman marked by ambition and charm, with tragedies awaiting her romantic entanglements. Her face was flooded on most wanted posters from Interpol blanket walls, labeling her a fugitive in 188 countries. She's been sentenced in absentia to 18 years for orchestrating one murder, plus another 6 for fraud and bigamy. She's suspected in at least 3 other deaths and multiple attempted killings, dating back to 1971. Born to a Brazilian family in Porto Alegre, Heloísa became a mother at 19 and soon adopted her first husband's surname, a pattern she would repeat, using names like Saad, Duque, Ribeiro, and Lopes. She studied law, became a lawyer, and by the 1970s had relocated to Brasília and Rio Grande do Sul, where she was accused of Social Security fraud and falsifying documents. Her intellect, magnetism, and legal knowledge formed a lethal cocktail. In 1971, while 5 months pregnant with German physician, 38-year-old Günther Georg Wolf, Heloísa was in a fatal vehicle crash. Wolf died, but she survives and later inherits his house as his widow. On December 20, 1977, during a vacation in Salvador, her boyfriend Carlos Pinto da Silva was shot 5 times and lives. He later accused her of pulling the trigger, but withdrew the complaint. In the early 1980s, she married Irineu Duque Soares. Months later, he's gunned down in Magé, Rio de Janeiro. Professionals label it a robbery homicide. Between the mid-1980s and early 1990s, Heloísa entered multiple relationships in alternates legal identities, all during a trail of sudden male deaths and inheritances. In 1987, she was married to Colonel Jorge Ribeiro, despite also being married to another man at the same time. Later, to claim Ribeiro's fortune, she hired a killer. Ribeiro was found bound, gagged, and bludgeoned to death in his Copacabana office, his skull fractured by a sledgehammer. On December 29, 1991, her new husband, Nicolau Saad, an elderly Syrian businessman, died suddenly. Though his death was ruled as due to a heart attack and cancer, he had a broken arm shortly before passing. She quickly took possession of his wealth. In May 1992, she married Wagi Elias Murad. A few months later, Murad and a friend were ambushed and shot dead in Recreo dos Bandeirantes. Her stepson, Eli Murad, grows suspicious and hired private detectives to investigate. Then, on October 11, 1993, police officer Luis Marques de Moda, who was working with Elia Murad to uncover Heloísa's schemes, was gunned down in Barra da Tijuca. The pattern of violence tightens its grip around her. From 1993 to 2005, the deaths and accusations accumulate, but Heloísa remains untouched by law enforcement. In August 2005, new aggravated charges were filed for Ribeiro's killing. With mounting evidence and pressure from prosecutors, Brazil brands her one of its most dangerous fugitives. On August 26, 2011, she was convicted in absentia for Ribeiro's murder and sentenced to 18 years. She also receives an additional 4.5 years for bigamy and fraud. After fleeing judicial orders around 2010, Heloísa disappeared, possibly into the United States, using aliases like Heloísa Saad Lopes. Interpol issued a red notice across 188 countries. Brazilian authorities offered a reward, which grew from 2,000 reais in 2010 to over 11,000 reais. She was last seen in Boca Raton, Florida, in May 2010 with Peruvian-American Vicente Lopez Huaman. Investigators suspect she may have also lived in California, Virginia, and New York. For over 5 decades, Heloísa's toxic presence, like a spider spinning new webs, cost countless lives, drained fortunes, and shattered families. She manipulated women's names, laws, and love to orchestrate a fortune and escape justice. Now, 75, living with freedom rather than behind bars, her story remains a brutal testament. Charm and legal education can veil violence and greed. The unsolved mystery of her whereabouts and the fate of those she left behind casts an enduring shadow over Brazilian and American law enforcement. Which of these cases do you think is more disturbing? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We've got more interesting videos coming up.